Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Through My Eyes with Professor Bolaji Akinyemi. It promises to be an exciting time tonight. There are loads and loads of topics for us to touch on this evening, various events across the countries of the world. So, thank you for joining us once again this evening. And as usual, Prof, you're welcome to the program. Do you have any opening remarks for our guests?
Well, just for me to say thank you for their joining us on this platform. Um, Actually, this is the height of my week. The engagement with um, um, with, I don't know how I should refer to them, but let me just say our friends who take time to join us on this platform. I look forward to them. As you rightly said, there are so many interesting events with international flavor that have happened since our last encounter last week. And I'm excited about sharing my views and taking their questions. So thank you, Mr. Moderator, for again having me on this platform.
Thank you, Prof. This evening, we're starting a little different than usual, Prof, because we're going to start by looking at some military events that have wider ramification for us. And reports coming out today show us from the United States show us that the Senate has backed the sale of arms to the UAE in a $23 billion deal. Some have suggested that the Senate has eventually caved in to the threat of a veto by President Trump. What is your take on this, Prof? Because the White House has said that the sales supports their foreign policy and that there's nothing strange about such a deal. What's your take on this, Prof?
Well, it's not surprising because at the time the UAE Israeli agreement was signed in the White House, it was speculated and not denied by either side. It was speculated that the sweetener to the uh, Abrahamic agreement was that weapons will be made available to the UAE, top range American weapons, weapons on which the Israelis had a veto in terms of the supply of that weapons to any Arab countries. And for UAE to agree to sign this agreement with Israel, she was promised the supply of these weapons. And presumably, finally, Israel simply had to agree on the grounds that the weapons will not target Israel, the weapons will target Iran. That's a mutual uh, uh, enemy of both the UAE and Israel. I won't rule out, I won't rule out the possibility that the United States may not actually sell to the UAE the exact top range, the Class A model of these weapons, that maybe some of the items that they feel may be of danger to Israel will probably be removed from the model that will be supplied to the UAE. to some extent, it changes the balance of power in the Middle East. You see, I mean, as we practitioners in the field usually say, there are no permanent friends, no permanent enemies. There are only permanent interests. And in a way, there is a risk here because it assumes that the UAE foreign policy is going to be frozen into the parameters where it is in now. It assumes that there will be no changes of government in the UAE. There are so many assumptions. And that's why I said, whatever it is, it probably will still guarantee Israel that strategic superiority in terms of weapons. Because what happens tomorrow if Iran and the UAE become friends? Even if friendship is too strong a term, become the antagonism is reduced to the level where both tolerate each other. Number two or number three, can't remember how many points I've made now. To do this on the eve of a departure from the White House creates a strategic difficulty in the foreign policy field for the incoming Biden administration. Of course, you know as well as I do, there are countries that have paid for weapons over the past 1 year, and those weapons have not been delivered. Part of the problem, for example, that Iran is having with the United Kingdom and had at one time with the United States was the fact that Iran had paid for some weapons which, after the Shah was overthrown, both the United States and the United Kingdom now refused to supply those weapons to Iran and refused to return Iranian money to Iran. So who knows the decision that the Biden administration will take January 21 in terms of supply of these weapons? Because these are not the weapons that are just hanging in the store to be pulled out within 2 weeks or 3 weeks and be transferred to the UAE. I don't think that these planes will and these drones will actually be supplied to the UAE before January 20. I don't believe so.
Do you see the Biden administration changing their mind about this?
There's a possibility.
Hmm.
There is a possibility.
All right. Prof, while we're still talking about this sort of military alliances that are being built and these deals that are being built, um, the US has again brokered a deal between Israel and Morocco. And that's about the fourth or fifth one they're going to do in the last sort of 4 5 months. Why the rush from the United States to broker these kind of deals with these countries? Number one. And then secondly, what is the strategic importance of Morocco to Israel, given the geographic location of those two countries?
Well, actually, Morocco and Israel have had a very intimate relationship for a very long time. Morocco is one of those countries that, first of all, there are Jews, Moroccan Jews, who were never expelled from Morocco and still stay in Morocco and unmolested. Morocco is one of those countries where Israeli Jews could travel to for one reason or the other. So there has been that close relationship between the two countries. Just as the United States sweetened UAE's agreement with Israel by this agreement to sell weapons, the sweetener for Morocco was that the United States will now recognize Moroccan ownership of the Western Sahara, which has been a contentious area between Morocco and the Sahrawis, who claim it as their own territory. And the African Union actually had recognized the Sahrawians as a member of the African Union when it was OAU. That was when the recognition was made. And Morocco, because of that, withdrew its membership from the OAU for a very long time. It just came back. So the Moroccans might not have felt that even though it's a departing administration, the recognition of its claim to Western Sahara by the United States creates a reality on the ground that now makes it worth its, uh, uh, its recognition of Israel. Again, would the Biden administration reconfirm this latest action by the Trump administration, or will it go back to its aligning itself with the UN position on Western Sahara? Well, one doesn't know. But what one can say is that the departing Trump administration is creating foreign policy realities on the ground that will create problems for the Biden administration. In how many areas will the Biden administration be prepared to take on Israel and have a hostile relationship with Israel because it is reversing some of these last minute foreign policy actions by the Trump administration? I think that what Trump is doing in the foreign policy field is not in the interest of the United States. And this confirms what I said on this program about maybe 3, 4 weeks ago, that perhaps the United States wants to take a look at its constitution that creates a lame duck president, a lame duck Congress, uh, um, in the sense of these people staying on for 2 months after the election. Nobody does that. And I think what Trump is doing is drawing the attention of the United States itself to some of these archaic provisions in its constitution.
Prof, one of the things that we see with this action between Israel and Morocco, um, it continues to show what some have called the race for Africa. because not only are we seeing Israel doing this, we've seen China coming into Africa, and that's been increasing over the last few years. But now we also have, quite recently, Russia choosing to have a deal with Sudan. What is your take on this, given the number of military bases that Russia has had in the past and has in Africa? Why Sudan?
Why not Sudan? Maybe Sudan was prepared um, to sign this agreement, to accept the offer of the Soviet Union, of Russia, to establish this military base in Sudan. I mean, the point which I probably should emphasize is that I'm not too sure that it is in the interest of Sudan to, eh, to have a military base by Russia, an agreement signed on the eve of an incoming American administration. This is going to be perceived by the new administration as a provocative act by both Russia and Sudan. What will be the reaction of the United States? And this is where, incidentally, the appointment or the nomination of the Secretary of Defense designate becomes very critical, because his last military post before he retired from the army, I think, was commander of what they call the Central Command. And the Central Command covered the Mediterranean area. That was his last military command. If not the last but one. I'm not sure of this. But in his command post, control and command post, was at the Central Command. Now, all the issues which we have been raising within the past 15, 20 minutes fall under the jurisdiction of the Secretary of Defense designate when he was in uniform. So it's an area he's very conversant with, and it's an area where he may be determined to take a stand in confronting these realities by the departing Trump administration and now by Russia. One of the lessons that I have learned, going all the way back to Lumumba, Nkrumah, even NASA, is that the United States takes very, very strong exception to Russian military or strategic presence in Africa. Even though technically we are all supposed to be independent, but the United States has regarded Africa and still regards Africa as its area of concern. And that's why the new command that the United States set up was actually the African Command, which was a new military command set up by the US. That's one. Number two, the United States also has military presence in Chad, in Benin Republic. So will it welcome a Russian military presence in the Sudan? I would doubt it. Because one of the things that every American administration is very sensitive to, accused of being soft on Russia, of being soft on communism. They are very, very sensitive to that. Because you may think, oh, well, we've just finished one American presidential election. Already the Americans are thinking of the next presidential election in 4 years, in 4 years' time. And the Republicans will be thinking about what issues would they raise against Biden-Harris administration. So and I don't know why the Sudanese agreed to this, frankly.
One more question on that, Prof. Sudan, South Sudan, they have their issues. Do you see this upsetting any dynamic between those two nations?
Yes, this may actually push the South Sudanese into American arms as a counterfoil to this president, so that instead of, if you like, a balance of power between the two Sudanese, one has now tilted the balance, and the other will feel compelled to look at the other side, which is the American side, in order to restore the balance of power between the two.
All right, Prof, before we move off the sort of military topics, there is another issue in Europe, and this is the increasing tensions between Turkey, Greece, the East Mediterranean, and undersea resources in that area, and the fact that there is now talk about potential sanctions by the EU against Turkey. And Turkish President Erdogan has used words like threats, blackmail, and he's even gone as far as to say this, and I quote: "The EU has never acted honestly. It has never kept its promises towards Turkey. We have always been patient. We are still being patient." Do you agree with Turkey's position on this?
My assessment of President Erdogan's global policy anchored on the Mediterranean, the East Mediterranean, uh, is that Erdogan is determined, I think, to recreate the Ottoman Empire. I think that is his ultimate objective, and that is the allies and the enemies that is making are all, I mean, there is a sense to the madness. He's taking on the Soviet Union or Russia, including shooting down a Russian plane during the conflict in Syria, leading to the death of, I think, one of the pilots, if not both pilots. He got away with that. Maybe it's not very well known, but actually the Russian intelligence was the one that tipped off Erdogan about the coup that was planned against him by the Turkish High Command. And one would have thought that Erdogan will feel that he owes Russia one. On the contrary, he's been fixated on the recreation, as I said, of the Ottoman Empire. That's what has just happened in the Armenian caravan war. And perhaps it's not accidental that today there was a victory parade in Baku, the capital of the country that fought Armenia, and he was there. Not only was Erdogan there, on display at the parade were some of the latest Turkish weapons that were made available to them during that war against Armenia. And because they are a Turkish-speaking people, the slogan now is one nation, two countries. One nation, two countries. In other words, they regard themselves as Turkish and they come under the umbrella of Turkey. So its quarrel with Greece should be seen within the context of that vast strategic dream of Erdogan. Whether the EU will stand up to him in a situation where even NATO didn't stand up to him, because Turkey is still a member of NATO, and yet he's bought weapons from Russia, which is antithetical to what NATO stands for, and he got away with it. So whether the EU will be able to carry out its threat to sanction him, or whether the EU will now draw the line on the Greek border in terms of the expansion of Turkish dreams is another problem, again, that will face the Biden administration and will also face the EU in terms of the credibility of its foreign policy objectives.
Prof, one quick question here. Is Turkey's, from what you've said there, it seems like Turkey's influence is growing significantly in that region. And do you see a change in leadership in Turkey upsetting that dynamic?
A change of leadership? Are you expecting one?
No. Because it seems to be linked to Erdogan. And
Yeah.
so what I'm trying to get to here is this something where Erdogan is building Turkey into this sort of empire that you talk about, but you also talked about a coup that was being planned on the other hand, which Russian intelligence kind of helped. And the point here is, are we starting to see a scenario where Turkish high rank don't necessarily agree with what Erdogan is doing and therefore may want to go in a different direction if he were to be removed?
Well, the coup attempt that I made reference to is about 3 or 4 years ago. So not just something within the past 6 months. It's about and it led to problems with the United States, by the way,
Yeah.
because Turkey or Erdogan said that it's the Russians that pull the hot iron out of the fire for him. Now, as in nature of strong characters like Erdogan, one doesn't really know whether he's building up any political personalities within his party in case for a post-Erdogan era. Right now, I'm not aware of anyone that is building up. People with strong characters like that, who come close to being a dictator, don't uh, don't go around, building up alternative personalities, because those alternative personalities may end up being a danger to them. On the other hand, like it happens in probably all countries in the world, this sense of nationalism or supranationalism probably commands a lot of acceptability in Turkey, who look back at the Ottoman Empire, another period that led to the end of the First World War, as a golden era of Turkey. And therefore, they may not really be too averse to what Erdogan is doing in that area. They may actually welcome this Turkish Renaissance based on, the golden period of the Ottoman Empire.
All right, Prof, I want to ask some questions, a bit of a follow up from last week when we talked about the vaccine from Pfizer, the fact that the UK was the first country to approve, first major country to approve a vaccine, and this week have started to give out doses of that to people. But then we had a refinement of the narrative from the government after two workers reacted to the vaccine. Do you think that? What are your views on that? Do you think that news is damaging uh, the idea that people can take the vaccine and it's safe for them to take such a vaccine?
Yes. Um, this will strengthen the hands of, or will strengthen the narrative that perhaps uh, Britain was a bit precipitate in what it did, especially after it now turns out that Pfeiffer was aware of the susceptibility of people who have certain kinds of allergies to that vaccine. And that perhaps if there had been a bit more time for reflection, then from the very beginning, the approving authority in Britain would have excluded people who have those kinds of allergies. It's very simple. You simply ask them before you give them the vaccine, what are you allergic to? It is a routine question that is asked when you go into hospital. They asked me, and I always tell them I'm allergic to erythromycin, and it is noted on my file. And they don't say, oh, why? Or this or that. They are used to people having allergies. And perhaps a bit more time for reflection, you could have asked this. Now, there's no big deal about having allergies. Human beings have allergies to one medicine or the other. It doesn't mean that the medicine is dangerous. I've just said what I'm allergic to, but millions take erythromycin in the hospital every day. There are other medicines that people are allergic to. but which are not dangerous. They will just give you an alternative. But you see, when you are dealing with this vaccine, that there is already now an industry of anti-vaccine or anti-vaccinists who have, an anti-vaccine narrative is part of this is part of this things that are going around about conspiracy theories. It simply now adds to it. See, we told you that this vaccine is not safe. People have now fallen, only 2 people have fallen in, but it could have been avoided. But nevertheless, my own take is there is nothing wrong with this vaccine. Nothing wrong. And people should still continue to take it.
To
And
take it.
now it's not just Britain. Canada has signed on to it. Saudi Arabia has signed on to it. Bahrain has signed on to it. I won't be surprised if by the end of next week there'll be more countries. In fact, we are waiting for today for the position of the American approving authority as regards it, but I will not be surprised.
Prof, before we leave that topic, are you surprised that we're not hearing in a widespread manner any African countries that are also subscribing to this particular vaccine and choosing to buy some of it?
The African situation is a very peculiar one. At the very, very beginning, and it's not the fault of we Africans, at the beginning, there was that stupid statement made by 2 French doctors. Let's go try vaccines in Africa. If it doesn't kill them off, then we will know that we can then use these vaccines in Europe. And the Africans now say, no, 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 you are not coming to use us as an experiment. You go try your vaccine in Europe. If it works, then we can revisit the situation. Now, people are now asking, are we going to get the vaccine, or would there be a monopoly by the Western countries on the use of this vaccine? And they will not ignore us. So you do, you are damned. You don't do, you are damned. So I'm not surprised that there is on our part as Africans that there is a hesitancy about rushing into. In any case, there are still not enough. So even if we want, I'm not sure we are going to be able to get. But equally, of equal importance is the fact that we have been spared the tragedies of COVID-19 for reasons which I'm sure medical people and scientists will later on be able to tell us categorically, whether it is the sun, which has a lot of vitamin D, which has been said to be a good anti-COVID-19 ingredient, whether it is that or whether it is the fact that the hydrochloroquine, which was looked down upon in America and in Europe, is something which we Africans use as part of the anti-malaria medication that we have. Whatever may be the reason, we haven't been visited by the COVID-19 tragedy. And so to that extent, we can probably afford to wait until all the other vaccines come on stream. Thirdly, don't forget that this particular vaccine needs specialized cold storage, which we don't have on a massive scale in Africa. So we might as well wait. I believe it's the Oxford one that I understand can operate on normal temperature, which will not need you building massive ice cold temperature. We might as well wait for that to come on stream.
Okay, thank you for that, Prof. Very quickly, before we go to address some of the new nominations from President-elect Joe Biden, there's a question here on YouTube, and I think this person probably refers to the same point that Jared Kushner has been raising about Saudi Arabia and Israel normalizing relations. Do you see that happening before the Trump administration is over?
Nothing will surprise me about happenings in the next 6 weeks. Nothing will surprise me. Who knows the kind of thing that could be given to sweeten to make it a sweeter palliative for Saudi Arabia. Definitely talks have been going on between Saudi Arabia and Israel. So who knows what Saudi Arabia may be offered by the Americans that will tip the Saudi position on that issue, into signing up a peace agreement or announcing their intention to sign an agreement or to enter into negotiation with Israel. The position of Saudi Arabia is a tricky one because she's referred to in Islamic circles as the guardian of the two holy mosques in Mecca and in Medina. So the status of Saudi Arabia amongst Muslims all over the world is a more ideologically and spiritually is a powerful one, and I think that Saudi Arabia is aware of that, and it's one of the things it will take into consideration in what its relationship with Israel would be. I don't think that Saudi Arabia will want to do anything that may you see, there's the competition between Saudi Arabia and Iran as to who will capture the loyalty of the Muslims universally. And for Saudi Arabia precipitously to go and sign an agreement with Israel may tilt that loyalty towards Iran. So it's one of the factors that I'm sure the policy makers in Saudi Arabia will be thinking about. So I don't believe it will happen, but the Middle East is one place, even though it has produced more profits than any other region in the world, but it is also one place that makes falsehood of prophecy if one is not careful. So I will not prophesy on what Saudi Arabia will
We
do
do.
or not do.
All right, Prof. Over the last few days, President-elect Biden has continued to announce his nominations for roles, and I want to play this short clip, Prof, and for about a minute or two, and then get your reaction to his nomination of General Lloyd Austin as Secretary of Defense, a designate. Let me play this, Prof, and get your response to this.
Mr. President-elect and Madam Vice President-elect Harris, thank you for your trust and your confidence and for the opportunity to serve as a 28th Secretary of Defense. And if confirmed by the United States Senate, it will be my sincere honor and privilege to return to the department and to lead our great service members and civilians in accomplishing the mission of ensuring our nation's security. You know, back in 1877, a young man from the small town of Thomasville, Georgia, Henry Ossian Flipper, became the first African American to graduate from the United States Military Academy at West Point. And after his commissioning, he was assigned to one of the Army's all-black regiments. And he became the first non-white officer to lead the Buffalo Soldiers of the 10th Cavalry. And so fast forward to today, nearly 150 years later, another native son of Thomasville, Georgia, stands before you as the Secretary of Defense designate.
Prof, what is your take on this nomination by President-elect Biden?
I am very touched by the nomination. To say I'm pleased would be, in fact, it would be an understatement, and in fact be regarded as condescending. This is a soldier's soldier, an oak of a military man. Solid, ramrod solid. But I welcome the nomination for all the reasons that have been given, and he himself has said it. First, African American that will be nominated Secretary of Defense. And even in the introductory remarks, I know you didn't play that, by President-elect Biden, who talked about, I think, whether it's a 45% of the men and officers of the American military being people of color. This is an appointment long overdue. But what I want to use my own program to draw attention to is the depth of what is internal to this nominee. I don't know if you notice, he never smiled. I don't know whether he has teeth or not, but if he does, no teeth showed. There was so much bottled within him. Honestly, it was only last night as I watched this presentation that I then really grasped the distinction. And I've got to be careful in choosing my words because I'm not really sure. You know, we've talked about this on this program before, about 4 months ago. What should we call ourselves? And I came to the conclusion that we should call ourselves Africans, while the Americans will call themselves African Americans, and the West Indians will call themselves maybe Afro-West Indian, but all of us drawing attention to our roots. But there is something there that is more than that. I think there is a distinction between African Americans with African names and African Americans with European names. Forgive me if my appellation leaves much to be desired. I can't do better than that. Why he didn't smile and why he did not even look pleased, I think has to do with the history of the Black African Americans in America. And let me read to you what it then brought to me. I went searching for it and I found it. It is a poem by David Diop, born in 1927, died in 1960. And I think you should pay attention to when he died. 1960, when independent Africa was just coming up. And the poem is titled Africa, My Africa. Africa, my Africa. Africa of proud warriors in ancestral savannas. Africa of whom my grandmother sings on the banks of the distant river. I have never known you, but your blood flows in my veins. Your beautiful black blood that irrigates the fields. The blood of your sweat, the sweat of your work. The work of your slavery. Africa. Tell me, Africa, is this you? This back that is bent? This back that breaks under the weight of humiliation? This back trembling with red scars and saying yes to the whip under the midday sun? But a grave voice answers me, impetuous child, that tree, young and strong, that tree over there, splendidly alone, amidst white and faded flowers. That is your Africa, springing up anew, springing up patiently, obstinately, whose fruit, bit by bit, acquires the bitter taste of liberty. That's what I thought about as I listened to the speech he made. Strong, tall, filled with strength. This was not a broken man. This was a survivor. Only God knows what he had gone through in his sojourn in the world, in the United States.
Prof,
I
there's one
finally,
question I want to ask you.
let me
Uh,
finish.
okay,
Let
sir.
me finish. I finally understood the difference between African American with African names and African American with European names.
One quick question on this, Prof. General Austin is going to require a waiver for him to be uh, eventually accepted by the Senate for this role. Is President-elect Biden pushing things just that little bit too much by having to go for someone who will require a waiver? And yes, Trump did it, but is he pushing it?
I think it's been a clever move by Biden. He will be challenging the Senate. If you could do it for General Mattis, a white officer,
Hmm.
why can you not do it for this officer? Is it because he's black? He's challenging them to show whether they are racist or not. Very clever, very, very clever move. Obviously, nobody is challenging the competence of this gentleman who carries himself with dignity. Nobody's challenging that. So I thought it is a clever move by them. And in any case, Biden has made a song and dance about his ability to walk the aisle, to reach agreements, compromises with the other side. Let us assume the worst scenario for the purposes of this narrative, which is that the Republicans win the two seats, the senatorial seats in Georgia. Let us assume that they do. I believe they will win. I believe the Democrats will win one and the Republicans will probably win one. However, let us assume that the Republicans win both. I can give you names of 5 Republicans who are not on the what I will call the Tea Party wing of the Republican Party, who will be prepared to cooperate with President Biden. And if he could hold his own Democratic Party solid, he will get the votes that he will need to get his cabinet members approved. I won't mention the names of the 5 now, but I know of 5 who by reputation are on the liberal wing of the Republican Party, and whom you could count upon.
Prof, we've run out of time, but I do not want to leave this one question unanswered this week. The talk of Susan Rice being a potential candidate in the Biden administration. Now, we know she's not, at the minute, it's not been put as a role that will require Senate approval. But what is your take on Ambassador Rice being appointed to the Biden administration?
Well, the latest information is that he's appointing her to his domestic policy council. That's not really her fault. I know the problem you are referring to is the Benghazi cross. When she was ambassador at the UN, and the well, quote unquote Islamic terrorists attacked the consulate in
Yes.
Benghazi and killed American diplomats. And she made some comments at that time which were a bit precipitous, and therefore got up the backs of the Republicans, which was probably why she was never really made the Secretary of State under Obama. But now that she's been brought back into the cabinet, into the administration, into a post that does not require Senate confirmation. Remember, she ran, I think, in Maine to be senator or governor of Maine around February or so this year, and she didn't make it. Maybe this is to keep her in the public eye and keep her now in a post where if she decides to go into partisan politics, she could say, I have experience in domestic policy. Maybe that's what is behind this appointment.
Thank you, Prof, for your views today. And sorry for taking you a little bit over time, but I just wanted to hear your take on that point regarding Ambassador Rice. And to our viewers, thank you for staying. Thank you for being there. We appreciate you. We'll be back here again, same time next week, for another edition of the program. Any parting words, Prof?
Well, just to thank them for their patience. I'm not sure. I'm sorry we're overrun in terms of time. I didn't know that time had flown. Maybe we didn't take as many of their questions as. But I think maybe next week we should reserve maybe 7 minutes for their questions so that they will feel part of the program. But I thank you.
We'll do, Prof.
Okay.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you.